All right, back with another top 10 list here. We are going top 10 tight ends. And to be honest, it was a little bit difficult to fully figure out 10 tight ends. I think that there is kind of a bit of a lack of tight ends in certain areas, but ultimately, I do feel good about these 10 I decided to go with. So yeah, let's just get into the list, starting off at number 10. I decided to go Jonnu Smith to start things off, which if you have not watched very many Miami Dolphins games lately, especially towards the end of the year, which fair enough, the Dolphins weren't a horrible team last year, but weren't a great one either, did miss the playoffs. Smith was a real important piece for that team. He really was. He's been weird where he's had some, had some years where he's been not great and kind of, wasn't great with the Patriots when they gave him a big amount of money. But ultimately, I think for the number 10 tight end, I feel like he's a fine addition to this list. I don't know if I'd put him too much higher than that, and I do feel like there is maybe a tier gap after 9, but yeah, he was a good tight end. I'll put him at number 10. Next up, I am going with Travis Kelce, whose statistics were honestly kind of shockingly similar to Jonnu Smith's last year. Ultimately, I still think there are things he does very well. I still think he does a lot of little things well in the receiving game, especially with setting guys up, with knowing how to get open against zone, but there's just no getting around it. Like, he hasn't been as good. And while he was great against Houston in the playoffs, he then was not great in the final 2 games for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, if you look at the numbers, so for pretty much his entire career, he had been 12 yards per catch or over. Last year, it fell to 10.6, and then, or I guess 2 years ago, it fell to 10.6, and then last year, it fell all the way to 8.5 yards per catch. That is a pretty massive drop off. Also, only 823 yards. Hey, you'll take that for a tight end, but that's the lowest of his career, not counting his rookie year. That's not a lot. Only 3 touchdowns. That's the lowest of his career, not counting his rookie year. So, because of that, it just wasn't it wasn't a good year. That being said, he's still, I think, a very good receiving tight end. I just don't think there's too much else that he can do right now, and he can block okay. He just, quite frankly, he's, someone who you can't be having out there as much as the Chiefs have him out there, so that's why he's at number 9. Number 8, I'm going with a Baltimore Ravens tight end. Will he be the only Baltimore Ravens tight end I put on the list? Well, you'll have to wait and see. Again, the stats aren't going to wow you, right? Only 477 receiving yards. But ultimately, I just think he's good. Like, when I watch him, I just think he's a good player, and he doesn't get the opportunities that everyone else on this list gets. So because of a guy who we'll talk about later on in this video, I guess I spoiled if another Baltimore Ravens tight end will get on this list, but that's besides the point. Yes, I do think that he is very good. I think the receiving ability is great, and I think just given more opportunities, we'd really come to see just how good he can be. Number 7 on this list is a Super Bowl champion, Dallas Goedert, who, very similar to Likely, the numbers aren't going to wow you. Now, he's weirdly gotten less yards each of the past 4 years. He had 830 in 2021, and then it's slowly gotten lower. He's had some injuries in there as well. But ultimately, I do think that he's another guy where, again, it is worth mentioning, he was banged up last year. So only 496 yards, but that was in 10 games. So honestly, he was kind of similar to where Kelce and Jonnu Smith would have been yards-wise anyway. But also, again, he's just not asked to do the stuff that those other guys are asked to do, and maybe that's a knock on him, but I think he's really good. I think it's just the situation. They don't need him to do that. A.J. Brown's going to get the one-on-ones if they're having those one-on-one situations. They're going to try and run the ball a lot. He's going to get exhausted having to run block left and right, as opposed to just being able to run routes. But ultimately, not that running routes is easy, but it's just easier than blocking a 300-pound guy, right? But ultimately, he's a tight end who can do everything really well, and because of that, I'm going to put him at number 7 on the list. Number 6, I decided to still go Sam Laporta, who, it's funny, we kind of talk about him as though he had this massive step down in year 2 after this awesome year 1, and that's because he started off slow in year 2, but ultimately, again, had 889 yards last year, or 2 years ago, and then last season he had 726, so it wasn't that far down. It was a step down, for sure, but ultimately, I still think he's a really good player. I still think he runs these routes really well, I just think that he's I don't know. I just think that he means so much to this Lions offense, and I do think that he's a really nice piece for them. Is he the most important piece? No, but I do think we're getting kind of more to these guys that are really relied on now and also are consistently playing well. That is also the case with my number 5 pick, a player who used to play for the Lions, got traded to the Vikings, and I think has been a very good player for both franchises he's been a part of. Another guy coming off of an injury, so the numbers aren't crazy last year, but the year prior he had 960 receiving yards for a tight end, is also a good blocker, so he is ultimately someone who I think is a really good tight end who can do several different things for Minnesota, so that's why I have him at 5. Number 4, I am still going Mark Andrews, who you could argue this is too much. I mean, again, he had that 1,300 receiving yard season back in 2021, which was kind of crazy. He hasn't quite been able to recapture that magic. And again, kind of similar to Likely, it's almost like those two guys are splitting time now, so it's hard to fully measure them. But, and again, I think the other thing you have to mention with Andrews is just the obvious, he did drop that pass at the goal line. That wasn't ideal, was not ideal, and just had a bad playoff game in general, but ultimately is still a really good player, can, receive really well, and is also just a ferocious blocker. And so when you add on his blocking compared to some of these other guys on the list who are maybe more just receiving guys, that's why I decided to put him at 3. That's why I put him at 4. My number 3 pick is a guy who I'm going to kind of go against that because I'm talking about blocking. But, okay, listen, when you win All-Pro as a rookie, you got to at least be top 3, right? Ultimately, is not the blocker that you would maybe want. But the guy had 1,100 yards as a tight end, and he's a young player. The blocking's going to develop over time. The blocking is... and just the 1 year thing is why he's only at 3. But he was debatably the best in the league last season. So because of that, yeah, I'm going to put him here at 3. And you could argue he should be higher. Number 2, who I really did consider putting at number 1, because he can block as well, is Trey McBride, who still had over 1,100 receiving yards last year. Only 2 touchdowns. Took him a while to get the touchdowns. He's not a touchdown guy, but ultimately does so much else so well. I have to put him at least at top 2. One of the real underrated players, and was honestly the Cardinals' best offensive. Well, him or James Conner, but I'd say he was the best offensive piece for the Cardinals last year. He's a fantastic player. But number 1, I am still going George Kittle, the guy who's had over 1,000 yards receiving back-to-back years while being maybe the best blocking tight end in football, with Travis Kelce kind of taking a couple steps back. To me, you have to keep Kittle as number 1. At least, we'll see. McBride and Bowers are right behind him trying to catch up. But for now, I got to give it to Kittle, the guy who's been doing it for a while. So, yeah. Those are my top 10 tight ends. Let me know in the comments below. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What would your list be? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.